It's about time someone told a story about a real-life superhero, one that doesn't wear spandex, you know. It's a good thing to sort of...
You did that once before with Jesus.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
No spandex there.
No spandex on Jesus, though I bet he would look great.
What do you do when the most powerful industry on earth tells you, don't touch that subject? Not politics, not money, not fame. I'm talking about Jesus. Because when Mel Gibson decided to make a movie that put the crucifixion right in the center of the screen, Hollywood didn't just shrug. They resisted. They warned him. They accused him. And for years, they treated him like a problem that needed to go away. But here's the thing. Every time they tried to shame him into silence, Mel came back with the same energy. I believe this stuff to the full. And today, we're breaking down the moments when people mocked his faith. And then Mel. Gibson unleashed the truth anyway. And trust me, if you think the biggest moment was the Passion of the Christ, wait until you hear what he's doing next. Quick disclaimer. Mel Gibson is a complicated, flawed, larger-than-life figure. He's had very public failures, and he's also had very public conviction. This video is about the faith side of that story. What he's said, what he's made, and what it cost him. Because in an era where keep your faith private is basically the unwritten rule, Mel did the opposite. He put it on a billboard. So I'm going to give you 8 moments. 8 real flashpoints where the culture pushed back, where the headlines got ugly, and where Mel refused to fold. And I'm saving the wildest moment for last, because in 2027, the story he's telling next could shake Hollywood all over again. But before we dive in, stand with us in telling the truth about courage. Like the video, subscribe, and send this to one friend who needs a lift today. All right, let's get going. Nobody will touch this. Picture this. It's the early 2000s, and Mel Gibson walks into Hollywood with a pitch that sounds like a financial self-own. An R-rated film about the last hours of Jesus' life. Shot in ancient languages, subtitled, graphic, unapologetic. The film was in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. Languages you don't exactly test well in a studio. Boardroom. And the studios? They basically said, no thanks. Even 20th Century Fox, who had a relationship with Gibson's company, passed on distributing the film. Executives worried it was controversial, potentially inflammatory, and not commercial. Enough for a major studio. So what did Mel do? He didn't beg for permission. He financed it himself, about $25 to $30 million for production, before marketing costs even enter the conversation. And when distribution doors kept closing, he worked out a service deal with independent distributor Newmarket for the US release, while keeping control through his company, Icon. Now listen, this is where a lot of people would have played it safe. Softened the message, smoothed the edges, made it more acceptable. But Gibson's whole point was, you don't sand down the cross to make it trend. And he wasn't shy about the spiritual motivation behind it either. In reporting around the film, Gibson was quoted saying, in essence, he felt led to make it. The Holy Ghost was working. Through me, I was just directing traffic, and he hoped it would have the power to evangelize. That's not Hollywood talk. That's testimony. Moment number 2. The script wars. Now fast forward. Before the movie even hits theaters, the controversy starts boiling. People argue about the script. People argue about the portrayal. People argue about what the film might do to the culture. And Gibson gets pressured. Hard. In 2004, Australia's ABC reported that Jewish groups had accused Gibson of anti-Semitism, and that Gibson denied being anti-Jewish, saying he was outraged by scholars who obtained the script and pushed for changes. In other words, change this, remove that, tone this down. But Mel didn't back up. He held the line on what he believed the story was. Not a weapon, but a mirror. A story about sin, sacrifice, and redemption. Moment number 3. The media language got nuclear. And then the reviews and hot takes start flying. Some critics attacked the film's violence, others attacked its theology, and others attacked its motives. There were protests, and the controversy over alleged anti-Semitism kept raging in the public conversation as the film opened. And the language got extreme. One reviewer compared it to a snuff movie, and a major newspaper critic called it the most virulently anti-Semitic movie since World War II. Propaganda. Now, whether you agree with those labels or not, here's the point for this video. That's mockery-level framing. That's make him radioactive framing. So what did Mel do when people said, this is dangerous, this is hateful, this is too much? He didn't say, okay, let me rewrite Christianity. Years later, he summarized the heart behind the story like this. The idea was that we're all responsible. that his sacrifice was for all mankind. It was a redemption. And I believe that. And then he dropped the line that pretty much describes the cultural battlefield. Christianity is the one religion that you're allowed to disparage. That's his claim. That's his lived experience. And whether you agree with every detail or not, you cannot deny this. He expected resistance and still pressed record. Ash Wednesday, and the world showed up. Okay, this is the part where Hollywood's prediction should have come true. Because on paper, this movie should have been niche. Church basement niche. A film critics didn't like, a studio didn't want, a project the industry called a liability. But The Passion of the Christ opened on Ash Wednesday, February 25th, 2004. And the box office went absolutely insane. It went on to gross about $370.8 million domestically and over $600 million worldwide, becoming one of the most successful independent films ever. And it wasn't just numbers. There were people mobilizing in real life, buying tickets, bringing friends, trying to get others to see it. Australia's ABC even ran a story about Christians helping market the film, including one man who reportedly bought tens of thousands of dollars worth of tickets so others could go. Love it or hate it, this wasn't a normal release. This was a cultural moment. And here's what I want you to notice. This didn't happen because Mel ran some giant, studio-sized marketing machine. A big part of the rollout was grassroots, word of mouth, pastors telling people, go see it. Families inviting friends, churches organizing group nights. IndieWire reported that the release was built as a service deal between Icon and Newmarket and that it already had significant pre-sales before it even opened. So the narrative shifted from Hollywood decides what wins to the people decide what matters. And that's exactly why the backlash got louder. Because when something faith-driven succeeds without permission, it exposes who the gatekeepers are. You'll never work in this town again. Now let's talk about something that almost sounds like a movie line, but it's real. When Jim Caviezel was considering playing Jesus, he said Mel Gibson warned him, "You'll never work in this town again." And Caviezel's response was basically, so be it. Because when you're carrying a cross, you don't pick it up for applause. You pick it up because it's right. That exchange reveals the price tag. Mel wasn't naive. He knew what Hollywood does to people who make Jesus the headline. He didn't just risk money. He risked relationships, reputation, career momentum, and still, he did it. And speaking of risk, it immediately makes me think of all of you still watching right now. Because in a world where it's easier to blend in than stand out, choosing courage is becoming rare. So seriously, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about stories that actually matter. Drop a comment if you've made it this far. What's one moment in your life where you had to stand for your faith when it wasn't popular? And real quick, if you want a daily habit that fuels this kind of courage, go deeper in Scripture. A tool a lot of believers use is Logos, because it helps you actually study the Bible, not just skim it. If you want to check it out, we've got a link in the description. All right, back to Mel. The industry still wouldn't celebrate it. Now let's talk about the part nobody likes admitting out loud. Even after The Passion became a cultural phenomenon, the industry didn't exactly throw Mel a parade. At the 77th Academy Awards, the film received 3 nominations: Makeup, Cinematography, and Original Score. And look, 3 nominations is not nothing, but it's also not what you expect for a movie that changed the conversation, broke records, and moved millions. It's like Hollywood looked at a historic moment and said, great, but don't get comfortable. And if you're a believer, you know this pattern. You can do something extraordinary and still not be acceptable. He admitted he was broken and pointed to God. Now, here's where the story gets more personal. Because Mel's faith isn't just something he talks about when he's promoting a movie. In that same Joe Rogan conversation, Gibson openly described his own addiction history, saying he was flawed, that he did drugs and alcohol, and that what changed him was appealing to something greater than myself, which he called a miracle. That's not image management. That's confession. And it matters because it reframes everything else. He's not standing there saying, look how perfect I am. He's saying, I needed saving too. That's Christianity. Nobody dies for a lie. Buddha didn't do that. Now we're at the moment that went viral. In January 2025, Gibson sat down on the Joe Rogan Experience and talked openly about the resurrection of Jesus. And he didn't do the watered-down, I like the teachings version. He said he views the Gospels as verifiable history, and then made this argument. All the apostles, Every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief. And nobody dies for a lie. Then he went even harder. When Rogan talked about how the resurrection is the toughest part for people to accept, Gibson agreed and said, basically, that's the point. It takes faith. And then he delivered the blunt line that became a headline all by itself. Who gets back up after he gets murdered in public? Buddha didn't do that. Now, people can debate apologetics all day, but you have to respect the boldness. He's saying this on one of the biggest platforms on earth, knowing full well the internet is going to clip it, mock it, and dissect it. And Rogan, who calls himself agnostic, agreed with one of the main points about the culture, that Christianity gets singled out in a way other religions often don't. That's not a church sermon. That's a public square. And Mel walked right into it. The resurrection and the next wave. And now for the final moment, because this is the one that feels like Mel looking Hollywood in the face and saying, I'm not done. In 2025, Gibson confirmed the long-awaited sequel is titled The Resurrection of the Christ, and he described the script as extremely ambitious. So ambitious that it's not just one film. Entertainment Weekly reported that Lionsgate is planning it as 2 movies, with Part 1 set for March 26, 2027, and Part 2 for May 6, 2027. Dates tied to Good Friday and Ascension Day. And just to show you how much attention this is getting, even casting has become its own storyline. In October 2025, people reported that Caviezel will not return for the sequel, with the project moving forward with a new cast. So yeah, this isn't just another faith-based movie. This is a lightning rod. Again. And think about what that means. Mel isn't pivoting away from the thing that made him controversial. He's doubling down on it. Because for him, the resurrection isn't a cute metaphor. It's the hinge point of history. And he's basically saying, you can mock me, but you can't unrise a risen Christ. So let's recap what we just saw. Studios passed, he funded it anyway. Pressure mounted, he held the line anyway. The media went scorched earth, he didn't fold anyway. The world showed up. Truth doesn't need permission. He knew it could cost careers. He did it anyway. The industry stayed cold. He kept going anyway. He confessed his own brokenness and pointed to God anyway. And now he's building the resurrection story bigger than ever. Anyway, that's the theme. Anyway, and I think that's the question for all of us. Will you obey God only when it's safe? Or will you follow him when it costs something? Because the Bible never promised you applause. It promised you purpose. So here's my question to you. Which moment hit you the hardest? Mel betting everything on the passion, the backlash he took, or him going public on Rogan and talking about the resurrection? Drop it in the comments. I read them. And this community is the best part of what we're building. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind you God is still moving, even in places people call too far gone, hit subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.